Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we are diving into the second book of the Savage Hope duet series by C.M. Wick. And if you haven't listened to the first book in the series, that link is going to be available down below in the description section. Once you finish that review, come and join us as we dive into the second and final book of the duet series, Her Heart. All right, so it has been 6 weeks since Mia left, and our boy Colin has been on a vengeance tour. That's what we're going to call it. He is somewhere near Agba, and basically he's taken out dozens of people. I think it's more than dozens at this point, to get where he is now, which is where the crown prince is, as well as Omar, um, who is, I want to say, second or third in line. I can't remember from the first book. So he's already taken out the first brother. He's in a dark room. He's listening to someone that sounds Russian, and there's a congressional hearing that they're watching on the television, and it's his right hand man, Trent. And Trent's telling Congress that, Colin is recuperating, trying to get back healthy. And you hear one of the men in the room say, "That's a lie, because he's been leaving a trail of bodies," you know? So then he hears some other movement, another voice. It sounds like a woman. Sounds like she's probably just there for entertainment. He has no intention of taking her out. So he enters the room. He takes out the brother, who's a crown prince, his bodyguard, and whoever else came in there. He sees Omar. Omar is puking his guts out in the sink. He beats up Omar pretty badly. And Omar seems to be like he's trying to say something like, you got it wrong or whatever, but he's just thinking he's a coward. So he stabs him in the heart, watches him bleed out. And so for him, he's avenged both the baby they lost as well as Mia. We switch to Mia. We fast forward about 6 months. We find out that it took her about a month to recover. She was then taken to Merritt Island, Florida, where there's a branch, and that's where she's been ever since. She does have the title of data analytics person, but they don't really give her like true work. It's more like busy work. So it's not challenging or anything like that. And we find out one of Colin's longtime friends, Reed, is kind of like, I don't want to say handler, but he kind of is. Like, it's his job to like watch over her. And he's actually really nice to her. He's not mean to her like Trent is. Trent really doesn't talk to her too much. On this particular day, Reese had asked her, well, why didn't you come to the company barbecue? And she was just kind of like, well, why is he wanting me to go to stuff? Like, is he trying to get me to socialize because he knows that, Colin's over me and he's already had someone? Like, her mind, it spiraled, right? And it really was just for the benefit for her to get out, and socialize. But she thought of it to a whole nother thing, because to her, she's been put in exile. That's what this feels like. So she hears some guys talking. She walks away from her desk. She looks at the screen that they're looking at, and someone says, "I wish that was my secretary." And so when she looks up, it's a security conference in Miami, and there's this woman that is next to Colin, and she's like, this has to be his new secretary. She's absolutely stunning, and she is absolutely destroyed. And so she decides, I need to leave all of this now. So even though she's got a great job, a great salary, it's like double from what she made as an assistant. um, she lives in a company townhouse. Drives a company car. you know she decides, I need to, like, if I'm going to be away from this, excuse me, I've got to fully be away from it. And so she packs her stuff, which is just like three suitcases of clothing and a carry-on, buys a ticket to Martin County, North Carolina, sends a envelope with all of her keys in it back to the branch, and that's it. She is really going to go start over, really have a new beginning. Mia goes to Keeling, North Carolina, which is where she grew up. She hasn't been here in about 6 years, we find out. Um, she comes from some money, and her mother married her stepfather Evan. Um, he apparently got everything. So, because her dad died when she was like really young. So the only thing that was left to her was the guest house. And so she pulls up because she had stayed in a motel, got a cheap car rental, and when she pulls up to this place, it doesn't look like it has been taken care of at all. Like literally since the day she left, it looks like nothing has happened to this place. It just looks god awful. So she goes knocking on the main house door. Evan comes to the door, and she was like, "Key to the guest house." He slams the door in her face. She's like, "All right." She'll wait for him. Um, Give him a few minutes. If not, then she's gonna have to go down to the clerk of courts, get the wheel and a spare key, and come back. But thankfully, he opened the door back up. Um, and then said, electricity is going to be about 300, and she was like, no, I'll give you $100. She's like, and I'll have someone from the electric company come out and put out a new box, a separate one, so they'll have separate bills. So I think the meter, did she say I think it was like a separate meter, the meter box, that's what it is. So she goes to the guest house. She sees how in disarray it is, which she should have known it was going to be pretty darn awful if the main house looks crazy, right? Like, if he kept that up, he's not going to keep up the rest. So she sees pictures that her mother had labeled, and it looks like they were pretty much destroyed. Inside, she saw where there was mold. It was just awful. So she knows it's going to be a lot of work to get done. But it makes her sad. She winds up crying because it's like a lot of those were pictures of her father that she had, and because a lot of her stuff we find out she wasn't able to get because Evan wouldn't give it to her when she was getting ready to leave. So that is sad. We switch to Colin. He is freaking out. He's pissed because of the mere fact that she was able to slip security because it was like in between shifts, as well as she had told him she was going to do an errand. So it just seemed like no big deal. And thus the reason she was able to sneak out. The only footage he sees is when she's leaving out, and he can see the hurt look on her face. Based upon the time, he knows clearly she saw that press conference, and we find out that wasn't his secretary. That's actually Vivian, who is his sister. Not many people know about her. I don't even think his original secretary knew about Vivian. So the way she saw the familiarity with them made her think it was something of a lover, but it wasn't. It was actually a sibling. Um, he, of course, is running Trent ragged, trying to find a woman. He's pissed off. They're not getting information from the airline out of Orlando because they're not able to get it. That stuff, unless they hack it. And I was like, if y'all a security firm, can't y'all just hack it? But maybe they try to do stuff legit. But I would have thought he would have just hacked it. But anyway, he made a comment to Trent like, "Do you need me to take over?" And Trent turns around pissed and looks to him and says, "I don't know. Do you think you can do it?" And he knows, Colin knows he's too emotionally attached to do it. But then you need to chill out and you need to let people do what they've been trained to do, you know? Um, we find out that the engagement ring that he had gotten her, he's been wearing that around his neck all this time. and he took it off and has hit in his pocket. So every time he reaches in his pocket, he's rubbing on that ring. He of course isn't gonna say anything to Trent because they're gonna be like, "What the fuck are you doing that for?" We switch back to Mia. The next day, she goes to the hardware store. She gets a bunch of stuff to clean up. She's also um, gonna get a job there. That way, she can get a discount on some of this stuff as well. She wants to start an online consulting business. She's thinking about all the different stuff that she's gonna need. She goes to the local Walmart. She gets a laptop. She runs into a former kind of friend, brother. His name's John Gilly. She's shocked to see him. He's in law enforcement now. He's a deputy, and he had heard from the hardware store guy that she was back in town already. So it's a small town. Stuff gets around super fast. They probably knew she was there when she left the airport. A signal went out. So they're having a little light conversation, and he tells her about, their suspicion about what's going on at the horse farm, because that's what initially that estate was. It was a horse farm. And they think some, illegal things are going on there. They basically think a meth lab is going on. And he asks her, if you know about any money problems. She's like, I haven't talked to that man or seen him in 6 years. Um, we find out the stepfather sold the last of the horses less than a year after she left. So he has clearly been having money issues for a very long time. So if he's burning through money that fast, I mean, that's not that far of a stretch, especially the way the place is kept. It's run down, you know, it's huge. So, you know, it's space for some stuff to go down. Deputy Gilly tells her, just be on the lookout, because they don't know if he's just allowing people to cook it or if he's selling it or what exactly is going on, but just to be on the lookout. And he gives her a card and writes his number on the back and was like, if you see anything suspicious, if it's an emergency, call 911, but, anything else, you can let me know. Then he tells her, if you ever want to get caught up one day, have dinner or something. And the way he's looking at her is not this friendly look. It's, the way a man looks at a woman. And so she just kind of says, I got a lot of stuff to do. But, that would be nice. So she gets back to the house. She does get a lot done. She falls asleep that night. And this is the first time that she's fallen asleep that she hasn't dreamed about Colin. We switch back to Colin. He is in Keeley, North Carolina. He's walking around the house. He sees it's pretty rough. He looked it up and he saw where it did used to be this like glorious horse farm back in the day that, actually bred champion horses. So then he goes, knocks on the front door, no one answers, snoops around the guest house. He goes into town, goes to the hardware store, because apparently he gotten some intel about her being there. And then he had a little conversation with the owner, and the old man, was like, yeah, she's working for him and all this type of stuff. And, you know, he kind of let him know this is where she's going to be working. If she wanted to stay where she was with you, she clearly would have stayed there, you know. So the old man's not dumb. He knows she's running from someone, but he's like, but hey, this is what it is. He does tell him that she went to go run a couple errands for him. He sees that her rental car is still parked in the parking lot, so he kind of looks around and he's thinking she's probably at the bank. Goes to the bank. Sure enough, that's where she is. When she comes outside, um, she opens the door. She sees him, and he's just like, Mia, you got to come back. And he's like, I can't protect you if you're not within the company. And I was kind of like, that's not true. Like, you got plenty of shmoney. Like, She doesn't have to work for you to protect her. You know, you use your own money and you pay for someone to watch her if that's what you feel she needs in order to be protected. So, I mean, I thought he had neutralized the threat, right? So, unless there's more, if there's like multiple threats out there or something like that, again, you pay for someone to watch over her. She doesn't have to work for Start, International in order for you to do that. So I was like, that's kind of crap. Just say you want her. This is when it's like you just got to be honest. Just say you want her near, cuz you can afford, you're a billionaire. You can afford to pay someone, a few people, for their job to be to watch her, to keep her safe, right? So I was kind of like, boy, please. He winds up following her across the street to a coffee shop, and he says, what would it take to get you back, for you to come back? And she says, home office. And he says, you know, that's not a good idea. And she says, well, I wouldn't have taken it even if you had offered it. He can still tell she's affected by him, which gives him like maybe not all is lost, because he's thinking that when she saw that newscast that day, what made her leave was that she realized she no longer felt anything for him, and that's why she was able to leave. So it's kind of like her, like, as long as she stayed around, she felt something, right? Because she was staying in something that was his. But the minute she left, it was because she no longer felt anything. And I'm like, this is so funny how they're both trying to figure out what the other person's thinking, and both coming to the most whacked wrong excuses. But it's because they both feel like the other person doesn't think of me that way, doesn't want anything like that. So the reason behind these actions can't be what it normally would be. I'm like, y'all just confusing yourselves. So she did say to him before she walked off that last night was the first time in 4 months that I didn't dream of you, and that was the sweetest dream, sweetest sleep ever. Mia goes back to the hardware store. Her boss is like, the fancy man, did he find you? And she's like, yeah. But she let him know she wasn't going anywhere. She was staying. So then she asked if she could return some phone calls to some roofers, because yeah, even the roof is in a bad shape. So he's like, yeah, go ahead, go in the back. So she goes in the back, but she calls Deputy Gilly and is like, calling him as a diversion, um, about, she knows why she's calling him, but yet she didn't say anything when she called the man. So she wasn't moving the conversation along, so he did it. So he was like, I take it you want to take me up on that dinner offer? And she's like, okay. So then he's like, all right, meet tonight at the Roadhouse at 6:30. So she goes home, she gets ready, has a whole meltdown of memories of how cruel she was treated by Evan, behind her mother's back. So he would never say this stuff in front of the mother. It was always behind her back. Um, and he would always tell her she was ugly. And so it kind of goes from hearing a lot of I'm ugly and whatever horrible thing he would say, to getting men that didn't treat her the best. And so now she's maybe ordinary, and that's like as high as she can possibly think of herself. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just so sad. Oh. So she goes on the date, and you know who comes in, our boy Colin. He doesn't say anything to her though, but he does make sure to be seated in their same section. So Gilly gets a phone call, Deputy Gilly gets a phone call. He gets up and goes to the door, and then Mia and Colin have this whole eye exchange, but no one says anything. And then when Deputy Gilly comes back, she says something about her boots or some crap. And he reaches down, and that looks like it's more intimate than what it is. She knew what she was doing. So they have dinner, they're about to leave, and we find out that the phone call was from the sheriff. Apparently, the sheriff had found out that he was on a date with Evan's stepdaughter, and So then John, Deputy Gill, I'll just call him Deputy Gilly. I don't know, it just works for me. Um, he's like, "You ready to tell me who that man was that you were staring at?" You know? And also, before they left out, the waitress comes over with the check. She's, when they were like, 'cause they asked for the check, and she was like, "Oh no, the check's been paid," with a nice fat tip by the dark, handsome man. So that's when Gilly, of course, is like, "You ready to tell me about the guy?" She's like, "Nope." And he's like, "Well, I'll at least feel better if I follow you home, make sure you're safe." And so he's like, "I just want to make sure he's not waiting outside for you or anything like that." He tells her, "You may not be ready to talk about it right now." He's like, "But whenever you're ready, I'll be here." They get to her place. He followed her. He's like, "Let me check all around the perimeter and stuff like that." Then he wants to go inside. And at first she wasn't going to let him do it, but then she was like, "You know what? Oh, well." Um, Because he pretty much was like, "If you don't, I'm just going to sit outside and wait all night." And I'm just kind of like, that's legal, but okay, here we go. Um, he asked her again, "Are you going to tell me about the man? Did he hurt you?" And she was like, "He didn't hurt me physically. Well, they had a little kinkier sex, but it was what she liked. It's not like it was, he was bringing harm to her or anything like that." He invited her to his sister's barbecue or whatever, and she thought that was really kind of him. And she, of course, she considered, she that's a possibility, she might go. That was kind of it. And he did he try and kiss her? I can't remember, because he made a comment about that was such a, it's harsh to a man's ego, because she's very indifferent towards him, and he's probably used to probably women swooning a little bit more so. And she just is pretty much like it's self-preservation. He then says to her, "You don't have to protect yourself from me." She says, "I have to protect myself from everyone." And I'm like, thank you. Like, what makes you so safe? So she goes to sleep. Next morning, there's a banging on the door. She looks at her phone, 6:32 in the morning. It's her stepfather, Evan. He's yelling at her to open the door because she's changed the locks. So he says to her, "This is my house. He wants access to that place." And she's just like, this is mine. This was left to me. This is mine. I'm still trying to figure out why that mama left her just a damn guest house and left him everything. I don't know. That seems kind of weird, especially that's your only kid. I'm kind of confused. But anyway, I digress. So, um, she goes and she opens the door, like not fully, just kind of cracks it open a little bit with the latch on it or whatever. And he, of course, is yelling at her, "I saw those expensive clothes and everything. Like, I know you've been holding out on me." So he knows she's got some money. And so that means he's already did a walkthrough before through her space. And he's trying to get at her, but because she's not a stick, she's got a little umph to her, she's able to hold him up against the door. But being that close, he grabs her hair. And so she had dialed 911, and all she had to do was hit the other one and hit call. But then she hears, "Let her go. We already know it's Colin." At first, Evan didn't stop pulling at her hair. Eventually, Colin came, yanked his ass up, threw him down. And the guy was trying to get to his truck because he's got a rifle. So Colin just showed him his handgun and was like, "Before you get to your rifle, I've been unshot you. So he told him, "You don't ever talk to her, and you don't come around here, X, Y, and Z." So eventually Evan leaves, and it's her and Colin, and he's like, "I'll give you home office." She's like, "I told you I wouldn't take it." He says, "Well, tell me what you will take. Tell me what you want. Just say something, Mia." And she asked me, she says, "Tell me the truth. Was I pregnant?" Because the doctors and stuff afterwards, the nurses tried to tell her it was a mistake. It was a, English barrier type of thing. But she could tell in the nurse's eyes that what that initial nurse had told her was true. So she asked him, "Did I miscarry?" And he said, "It was true, but I thought it was better for you if you didn't know." And she was like, "Better for you to throw me away?" He's like, "No, that's not how it happened. She's like, "Yes, it is. You cast me out." So then they're going back and forth. And at this point, she just wants him to leave. She doesn't want to talk to him anymore. Um, he, of course, is like, "I don't want to leave you here alone with that man. He's not safe." And she says, "I don't care what you do. I just don't want to see you." And he tells her, "Okay, well, then you won't." So Colin waits outside. Eventually, he's kind of hiding in the cut, and he does see Deputy Gillies come, and it's a conundrum for him because it's like he wants her to move on because he knows it's the best thing for her to do, but at the same time it's painful to watch her to move on. So Gilly wasn't there long. She didn't look as sad as before when he left. So then Colin calls Trent, or maybe Trent called him, I can't remember. But there apparently was supposed to be 4 people on the ground in Keeling today, and they're not here. And Trent's like, "It's not happening." He's like, "A protocol has been put in place, the same one when you were overseas in the Middle East, and basically it's the way to save the company, and it cuts him off. So the only funds he has access to is this one account they call Lent, and it has about 20 grand in it, and this basically keeps him from doing something that could like screw up the whole company. The company's worth billions, so Trent's like, "There's an open ticket for you, and there's also one for her. Um, do what you need to do, and you need to get back here." He's like, "If you love the woman, tell her, do whatever you need to do, but deal with your shit before you come back." And he's like, "Give her the damn ring. You've been hanging it around your neck all these months." So he thought Trent didn't know, but he again tells him, "You need to deal with it. We're not going to, use resources for you to do your personal stuff." But this is my thing, but it's still his company, right? I'm just saying. It's I get you want to do what's best. Is this really putting the company in dire straits? I don't know. It seems a little radical. I don't know. He tries to call Reed, but the calls are directed back to Trent. And I'm starting to wonder, like, okay, so was Trent behind this? Is this a way for him to take over the company? I don't know. I start suspecting people quickly. We do get a little backdrop about them. So Reed was married to his high school sweetheart. They all enlisted at the same time, and couple years in, she winds up getting pregnant. She was about 5 months. Um, Reed didn't want her to travel, but she wanted to surprise him. And when she gets there, there's a bomb in one of the buildings. She winds up losing the baby, and the effects of everything left her infertile. So the truth was, he left her with Reed because he knew he would protect her. You know, he would keep an eye on her. Um, he would look after her. And so when Reed, came back, the wife, she was really withdrawn. It kept getting more and more. So he had to stay overseas. So he had requested leave to go visit. It was denied, and so he went AWOL. And when it came time for them to all re-enlist, they were like, "We're done with the army." They felt like they had given everything, and then when it was something for them and their families, the army didn't care. But I'm just like, that's kind of how that works. You know, with anything that is that's a business, that's how it works. Like, unfortunately, Your needs don't matter. What matters is that of that company, of that organization. And that's why you don't be being like that with certain stuff, because you see how fast they turn on you, and then you feel so used because you've given everything. So that's how they've all remained close, and that was their little backdrop for their past. Um, he is at the point now. He's like, okay, I got limited resources. Calling at this point, I gotta neutralize the threat, which is Ethan, the stepfather, and I gotta do it before I leave her. We switch back to Mia, and Deputy Gillies tells her, you need to get a gun. And she's like, nope, don't want that. I'd wind up shooting my hand off. So he made a comment that let her know that he had been talking to Stark, to Colin. And so when she finds that out, she's just like, oh my gosh, like Colin done went to Gilly and done told him this. And she's like, well, I'm not doing that. He's like, well, what about a taser? And she says, well, do you know any taser stores here? And he says, nope, but I have one at my place. So they go to his place, and there's a guy named Carl. He's been out of work for a while. And he asks the guy, hey, you want to earn 20, $30? And Carl's like, sure. So they, this is wild, let her test out the taser on the guy. Um, So he tells her, make sure you don't close. You can't keep your eyes closed. You gotta know where you're shooting this thing, and make sure they're at least 10 feet or whatever it is away from you, so they don't fall on you, and then you get electrocuted. Um, she is asking about kind of what's going on with the investigation with Ethan. She's like, are you guys any closer to busing him? Like, what's going on? And all he said was, we're a lot closer today than we were yesterday, since Colin made a phone call to the DA. And she says to him, like, I really don't want to hear about you crushing on Stark. And then he starts kissing her, and she feels a little something, but her body doesn't quite mold into his like it does with Colin. So she winds up pulling back. And Deputy Gillies is like, I'm not crushing on him, but I do have to admit he does have great taste. Colin pretty much goes into trying to figure out how to nail Ethan, right? So he's booked a room at the motel, but he doesn't sleep there. He has a sleeping bag, and at night he sleeps outside of her guest house. During the day, he watches her at work. This has become his life. Um, we find out he's able to find out some information because they were trying to try and find a link, because they're like, someone in that department is probably helping him. And so he finds a link between one of the officers um, in the police department and their family members and friends and stuff like that. And the officer gets arrested, but no one gives up any information about Ethan. So apparently it was another meth lab they were taken to, and that's the one that wound up getting busted. So now they're a little worried, because someone's tipped somebody off. Ethan knows she's had Gilly around, right? So he's probably going to come after her even more so. So there's some concern, legit concern, with this now. Mia's on her way home. She's turning in and she sees what looks like one of her grandfather's flags. And she's thinking, like, you know what? I can probably get some evidence and finally get rid of his ass. So she parks her car, goes, and sure enough, it's a bunch of chemicals. Everything's in there. But guess who's also in there? Good old boy Evan. So he points a gun at her, tells her to hand him a funnel. she looks at it. She's like, I'm not stupid. I see like you have on gloves. You want my prints on this funnel. So then he's like, I've already set up other stuff basically to frame you and Deputy Gillies. So it's going to look like there's stuff at Gillies' apartment, stuff in her um, town, in her guest house, that it's going to look like they were trying to set him up. But then she's going to wind up dying in an explosion. So he's got this whole thing figured out, apparently. And it's going to look like she died trying to set him up. So she's thinking, I got to run, right? I got to get out of here. So she runs for the door, and he tells her, one more step and I'm going to shoot you. And then he starts saying all this nasty stuff to her, you know, which is just fucking weird. He says to her how, when he fucked her mom, she was just a bag of bones, and that he's sure that she lets Gilly and whoever else like fuck her all kind of ways. Like, it was just like, oh my gosh. And then a shot's fired. It misses Evan, lodges in the door frame, and Evan automatically hits her in the head with the gun, knocks her down. Colin runs in. Boom, they're fighting. Colin keeps telling her to get out, but she won't leave him. There's chemicals that have spilled. I mean, shit ton of toxins everywhere. But her thing is she's not leaving without him. So she's trying to think of a way to get Evan to stop. So she gets the taser, shocks him. But again, it's just more and more toxins spilling out. This is getting worse and worse. So she's having a hard time breathing. Eyes are burning. This is a lot, And he is screaming at her, Colin is, to get out. And of course she doesn't, but someone comes and snatches her up. She doesn't know who it is. She's screaming, calling for Colin. Then there's boom, an explosion, and she tries to go back in, but then a bunch of men rush in and they pull Colin out on their backs, and we find out that these were Colin's men. They came to get him. They were not police officers. That's why they got there so fast. And Deputy Gillies was quickly he quickly told her, I guess Colin had called him and the sheriff to let him know, like, this is going on, X, Y, and Z. And so that's why he had gotten there so quickly, because otherwise I was going to put him on the suspect list too. I'd be quick to throw him in there. So they pulled Evan out. He was dead, but they had to pull him out because otherwise he would have dissolved in there with all the chemicals. So they have a red sheet over him. It's not that she wanted him to die, but she is relieved that he's not going to be a problem anymore, because he's gone. So she's asking Gilly, if Colin's going to be okay. He's like, we got the best people working on him, medical staff and stuff like that, but he seems cold. Now, my thing is, what are you being cold for? What are you getting upset for? You knew she was stuck on somebody else. This is not something you didn't realize. Um, so what is the reason for you being upset? She never told you once, I want to be with you. The only kind of thing she did was with the boots, but you saw right through that because that was about Colin. So I was just like, I don't know what you get mad for. Get out your feelings, because you see now, well, you should have saw before how she was acting about this person, that clearly there was a lot going on, and that has not been solved in 3 days or a week. So I was like, he could kick rocks. So she's at the hospital. They check her out. Eventually, she's able to be released. She's given an envelope. It's got her phone telling her where her car is. It's from Deputy Gilly. She calls his phone. He doesn't pick up, sends her the voicemail. She's hoping she can at least salvage that friendship, but if she doesn't, hey, it is what it is. She, of course, wants to know how Colin's doing. One of the nurses winds up coming to get her because, as normal, Colin is acting in complete ass with the staff. He doesn't start to act right till he sees her. They wind up having a conversation. She kind of lets him know um, that his men had come and saved him. And he's kind of like, that's not true because Trent cut me off. And he's like, well, he sent someone because if he didn't, we both be dead right now because the guys that came, those were not cops. So then he asked her why did she leave, and she told him this little story about when she was younger, when her mom at first got with Evan, and she knew from the get go he wasn't a good guy. She didn't like him. Her mother helped her pack a backpack and told her she could, if she wanted to leave, she could, but she couldn't take her horse. So different people, farm hands worked at the house. They watched, didn't let her go far or whatever. And eventually she stopped at the end of the road and she cried. She came back home. Her mother never asked her why she was running away or anything like that. So she didn't know why she was telling him this story. But he's like, I mean, that's not what I wanted to know. Like, I want to know why you left Florida. And she said that she wouldn't really answer him. She started paying attention to his stuff and she saw that there was a ring in his pile of things, but she wouldn't touch it. He goes on to tell her how Trent, you know, um, had told him he needed to resolve things between the two of them before he could come back, and she shook her head, kind of like, because he asked, are things resolved, and she just kind of shook her head, but we don't know which way she shook her head, like if it was a yes or no, we don't know. Trent and Reed show up. They're not getting any information out of the nurse. Trent sees Mia, wants to grab her, ask her for information, but he doesn't. She just kind of tells him, he's doing his normal, giving nurses a hard time. And that pretty much tells you how he's doing. She tries to walk off. Um, she sees the woman from the press conference, and that, of course, does something to her because, again, she still doesn't know that that's his freaking sister. So then Reed follows her. They have a conversation. She's talking to him about um, pretty much like not answering any of his questions. Just kind of like, yeah, he's going to need clothes. He's going to need X, Y, and Z. Just not paying attention to anything that Reed's actually asking her. And she's mad at him too because she's mad at everybody because, again, she feels like she was exiled. She was thrown in Florida. And no one would tell her the truth about losing the baby. And Trent says something, not Trent, I'm sorry, Reed says something that makes her stop, and he says, I lost the baby as well. And so that made her stop walking. He tried to get her to go get some coffee, but she didn't want to. She wants to get out of there. So the next day, she goes to talk to the bank about possibly trying to take over the mortgage. And the guy was like, with your credit, you don't have enough in savings. Like, you can't take this over. Basically, left her out of the bank. A couple days later, she's at the house and up drives the guy from the bank. I think his name was Richard, and the woman from the press conference. And the woman's like, "Don't you have something to tell her?" And the guy says, "Well, there's been a bid of 1.5 million for it, and it includes the guest house. Do you have a competing bid?" And so then the woman tells her that Colin's in room 35, whatever it is, and she's looking kind of confused because she's like, "Why is this woman telling me this? Like, this is who he's with currently, right?" So she's still under that guise. And she's like, this doesn't make sense, but she still takes her ass to that hospital. So she's pissed off that he's the one that put in the bid. Um, he tells her he's going to need a place to stay, he's going to need a rehab. And she's like, you can rehab anywhere. And he's like, but I want to do it here. That pissed her off because she doesn't want him to do it. She claims she doesn't want him to do it, but that's a lie. Um, what I think is confusing for me is I want to know what part of this that you don't, why you're still thinking that this person doesn't feel anything for you. Like, he has risked his life how many times? Like, what are you not comprehending that you still think this man don't give two fucks about you? Like, get it together. So she kind of annoyed me at this point because if you need more answers, this was a time for you. This is the open forum to get them. You could have got them the first time at the hospital, but you didn't want them because you're still mad about something, but you can't put yourself completely around what it is you're mad about instead of trying to get answers. Like, you were denied answers for months, and then when the person that can provide the answers are there, you don't want to ask. That's just fucking dumb. We switch back to Colin, and he's gotten out of the hospital. He's gotten the keys. He is moving into the house. Of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but dude got shmoney, so that's not really a problem. um, each day, guess what? He's got to go to the hardware store. So each day he goes to the hardware store. So on this particular day, well, actually, let me go back a little bit. The day that he moved into the house was the day that she moved out of the guest house and moved to the motor lodge, which is where he had booked for a period of time. He, of course, is not happy about it, but he's like, it's going to work some kind of way. He's fixing up this horse farm. And so each day he's got to go to her job to get supplies. Old man Kepler is the one that normally helps him because she will not. So then he finally gets everything from his attorney with everything about the house. And he says he's going to just lay everything on the line to her and see what she says. So we switch back to Mia. She goes to the diner to do a little searching for a job. She knew she should have been doing this before, but she hadn't. A man comes up to her in a suit, asks her if her name is Mia James, and he says, "I just need to see some ID to verify," and he gives her some paperwork. And this paperwork is saying that the horse farm is hers. She is floored. She, of course, leaves, goes back to her motel room, and there's a package there. It's all the pictures that she thought was ruined. So he had them restored. He had told her before that there was an algorithm that the NSA uses, and she didn't let him finish anything about that. But come to find out, he was saying that because he had a way to restore her photos. I thought that was super sweet. She, of course, goes to that farm. He comes out. He tells her that a rescue horse is going to be there tomorrow, and he wants to know if this space will be good for horses and children and possibly him. I'm not gonna lie, I thought that was so incredibly sweet. We fast forward 3 months. She's hired Ray back. Ray used to work on the farm. He was one of the farm hands, and he was one of the last ones that Evan fired before she left for college. So she was able to hire him back, and they've gotten a pregnant horse. It's underweight. It's about to give birth. Colin's freaking out. He's kind of back towards the wall because this is weird. um, After everything happened, she was gonna go to the guest house, and he pulled her into the main house. And as they were about to fuck, they had like this whole emotional conversation. He told her why he stayed away. He was trying to protect her. He thought that was the best way that he was doing it. And she's like, "You left me, and you left me. I felt alone." And he was like, "I watch you every day on a monitor. I never left you, but I wasn't there physically." And he's like, "I'm sorry for that." And he finally tells her he loves her. And he's like, he wasn't going to give her the ring that night. He just wanted permission to love her. And he's like, "I'm gonna make mistakes again, you know, but just bear with me, basically." And I was like, "Oh, that was sweet." And then of course they had their nice heart fuck. Um, so after that, it was a really graphic. It was a erotic scene, but it was great. We fast forward 10 years. We found out that they have had 3 kids, a set of twins, Stephen and Jonah, and a girl named Tasman. And the little girl is like her dad. She's calculated. They're trying to throw them a 10th anniversary party. Their Aunt Vivian is there to help them. They've settled into a great life. When she was younger, she had a horse named Corabelle, and it was sold. And so he found a horse that looks exactly like it and bought it for her. And so Race checked it out and everything. So they wound up being really happy and having a really great life together. I thought that was super sweet. It really felt like, yes, like I know it's a full story, but it was like two stories. Like when we've read the first book and everything that happened in the Middle East, it was like, oh my gosh, boom, pow, bang. And then the second book, she comes back to the US, and I didn't know it was like, oh my gosh, we got to deal with her stuff and her past. And I didn't see it going down that lane. So that was kind of like, oh my gosh. I would have wanted to know a little bit more about the mother and more of their relationship, because on her part, it didn't seem like it was a bad relationship, but at the same time, why you left that man all that shit and you didn't leave your one kid more than just a fucking guest house? I'm just saying. That right there kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So I wish we could have, dove a little deeper into that. I thought it was going to be something along the lines of he had switched the will. Everything was supposed to go to her, or mostly everything was supposed to go to her, and he had switched it some kind of way. But we never get that thriller of a twist. But that's what I was trying to think in my head. So, what did you guys think of this duet series? Let me know. Drop down in the comments and let me know. If you all have any suggestions as well, drop down in the comment section. Drop those different suggestions, and I will definitely look into them. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook or journal, I do have those on sale, and those links are going to be available down below in the description section. I really do appreciate all of you all listening, your beautiful comments. They mean so much to me. Make sure you all keep sharing. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, I truly do thank you all for your support and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.